What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So yesterday, we had a massive leak hit the internet. It was a huge list of game titles, some unannounced, others already announced but heading to different platforms. It was from a bunch of different game companies, and it all came from Nvidia's servers. We're going to go over all that here today. Also, we're going to be talking about Deathloop, as reviews did go live yesterday, and it looks like we may have another Game of the Year candidate on our hands with this one. And we are also going to be talking about Nintendo, as they have finally commented on the whole situation around the Switch potentially seeing its first price cut. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below and ring that notification bell so you can keep up to date with all the uploads here on the channel. And we're going to start today with the UK sales charts. Let's head over here to the top 10 because it'll give us an idea specifically as to how WarioWare Get It Together and Tales of Arise did in its first week. And we can see at the top here, WarioWare Get It Together does debut in that #1 spot. Now, GamesIndustry.biz does note that this was like a softer week when it comes to sales overall, as WarioWare Get It Together sold less than Miitopia did when that debuted back in May. Number 2, we have Tales of Arise. Then we have NBA 2K22 at 3, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at 4, Minecraft on the Switch at 5, Life is Strange True Colors debuting at number 6. Then we have Animal Crossing New Horizons, F1 2021, Grand Theft Auto 5, and rounding out the top 10, we have Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Now, it is important to note that these are all physical sales, and we assume that we're to the point where it's like 50-50 almost, digital versus physical. So hard to say how these charts would look if digital sales were included, but at least for now, it looks like WarioWare Get It Together did debut, topping the sales charts in the UK. I am curious about Tales of Arise coming in at number 2, despite being on several platforms as opposed to WarioWare just being on one, and I guess we'll find out more as we go along from Bandai. I'm hoping Tales of Arise does well when it comes to sales because the game is legitimately good, and I think they're on the right track here with the series. Also, we have talked about Kojima having some pretty zany ideas at times when it comes to game development, certainly unique ideas, and in a recent interview, he even talked a bit more about some game development ideas he had in mind going forward. We can see this over on Silicon Era where they did transcribe it. He says, "I want to create a game that changes in real time. Even though there are people of different ages and trades playing the same game, they are playing it in the same way. Instead, I want the game to change based on where that person lives and that person's unique perspective, because you would defeat vampires using the light from the sun and Boktai. I would change based on where and when you played the game." That, by the way, that is a Game Boy Advance game that had a light sensor on it. And depending on where you were playing it at night or during the day, it would be able to recharge your gun in the game. So, I mean, I guess that would be something he'd be kind of talking about there, where you are at the time and how it would affect the game. Says that kind of feature connects man-made systems to real life. And I feel like Kojima is trying to explain what he means, and he has a hard time doing it, and then he shows up with something like Death Stranding, and people still don't get it. So I do kind of think it would be interesting to see Kojima work with Microsoft, for example, and make something based on the power of the cloud, or at least be able to leverage the idea of information that's provided by the cloud, like we see with Flight Simulator, where it can basically give us up-to-date information and create entire landscapes that are fairly accurate when it comes down to even the city levels. So who knows what Kojima could do with stuff like that. He's talking about merging kind of the real world with video games, and he's mentioned things like horror games sending you text messages in real life. So I guess we'll see what Kojima has in mind for his next title here in a bit. But if he does sign that deal with Microsoft and he's able to use Azure, who knows what he comes up with. Oh, and of course, one of the big hype moments during that PlayStation showcase is when Wolverine's Claws came out, and it looks like we could be kind of gearing up for a mature game from Insomniac, as most of us were hoping for. We can see this over on Twitter. This from Brian Horton at Insomniac, saying it's a full-sized, mature tone game, that being for Wolverine. I don't think anyone was saying it wouldn't be a full-size title, although I guess some people are looking at Miles Morales and that being like a smaller title compared to Spider-Man, or what we expect Spider-Man 2 to be. It does look like Wolverine's going to be a full-fledged game, and the mature tone makes sense. I think most of us are expecting this to be a mature rated game, and I hope that's the direction Insomniac takes it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this massive leak that started to circulate yesterday. It was like a whole Excel spreadsheet of like 1,800 different titles, some unannounced, others, like I said, are announced, but also seem to be talking about platforms that the game is not on currently. And we can head over here because on Reddit, they did actually even sort these out from, like I said, a very messy spreadsheet for the most part. We can see here, these were pulled from Igor, and there was even a full YouTube video and Medium article that I'll link all that down below, talking about how they were able to pull all this information from Nvidia's GeForce Now server. So what we're looking at here are log files from Nvidia's servers, and these are games that have at least been, I guess, tested or placed there at some point. And I mean, we can start at the top with Sony. We have the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves edition, Helldivers 2. Interesting to see that. And that's what I mean. We're going to see games on here that you haven't really heard of or has been kind of rumored or mentioned at some point. It does appear that these are games that are kind of being streamed and tested through GeForce Now, and that would make sense considering we've had a lot of remote work, right, that's been ongoing now. And even if you do previews in certain press, you would have the game streamed to you in order to play it. Like Far Cry, for example, at a recent like streaming event, and that's how press had a chance to play the game, was through a stream. Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, and it goes on further from there with Returnal, Demon's Souls. God of War is the one game that's mentioned here that also has Steam attached to it for PC. So to me, that does say, as we all expected, God of War will be going to PC at some point. I wouldn't be shocked if that's the next one up after Uncharted. Now on Microsoft's side, we have Gears 6, Oxide, that's an unannounced title, Project Holland, which Jez Corden did confirm is the codename for Fable. So we are getting some code names thrown in here as well that are correct. Project Typhoon, that was Contraband, also confirmed by Jez Corden. And then Project Woodstock, that is, Jez Corden believes that's Forza. And we have the Untitled The Initiative game, Halo 5 Guardians, Avowed, Kalimba, Indus, and Gravity. Now, this is where things get kind of fun because we get to Square Enix, Chrono Cross Remaster, Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster, Final Fantasy VII Remake, which we also know that that's going to be making its way to PC at some point. Final Fantasy IX Remake. If there was any way you could annoy fans of Final Fantasy any more than you already did with Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's if you pull that same tactic on Final Fantasy IX. Then there's Final Fantasy 16. Then we have Tomb Raider Anniversary. This is for 2021. Unannounced title by Square Enix. And then Kingdom Hearts 4. I'm sure that'll come out in, I don't know, 2032. Looking at Capcom, these do kind of line up with some of the Capcom leaks that we had released online. Resident Evil 4 Remake, Street Fighter 6, Dragon's Dogma 2, and then even Monster Hunter 6. Take-Two does have the GTA remasters labeled here with 3 Vice City San Andreas. They also have some BioShock titles, even with BioShock 2022, which I guess next year we can look forward to seeing more about that one. For EA, there is Titanfall 3 and even an untitled Respawn game. And then for Bandai, there's Tekken 8. Curve Digital has Human Fall Flat 2. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's so many games to kind of read through and look at. I will tell you though, there was no Persona 5 apparently. So unfortunately, the Persona 5 going to PC rumors are not looking great now. Now, I do want to stress, just because a game is on this list doesn't mean that it's coming out. You could be using these different streaming services like GeForce Now to just test stuff in development. Maybe you're kicking around some ideas and you're like, oh, could we make this work? Let's play around with it. And if we can, we'll kind of build on it. We'll present it and we'll pitch it even to Square, whoever there that they can, to kind of build out an actual roadmap and start development full on with that game. The one that I would like to see them do is obviously Final Fantasy Tactics Remaster. That would be amazing. I think it makes sense because Final Fantasy Tactics is awesome and it really could use that, especially if they just release it across the board on all platforms. But then you look at stuff like Kingdom Hearts 4 and some others, Final Fantasy IX Remake, and those get a little more dicey, especially with how they did Final Fantasy VII Remake and the controversy that kind of caused there. But interesting nonetheless to look through this and see even some ideas that these companies had as they worked through streaming, of course, over the last couple of years now, with remote work certainly taking over in the industry. Next up, let's talk about that Switch price cut. We had talked a bit about the rumors kind of circulating that the Switch was seeing a price cut in France and different parts of Europe. Well, now it looks like that's official. We can see this over on Eurogamer, where they do point out that overall the Switch itself has dropped by about 20 pounds now to $259.99. And they even have comments here from Nintendo. This from Eurogamer saying Nintendo of Europe is changing the European trade price of the Nintendo Switch console to retailers. This from a company spokesperson to Eurogamer, more than 4.5 years after its release. Nintendo Switch continues to have strong sales momentum in Europe. After carefully weighing out a variety of factors, including currency exchange rates in Europe and the upcoming launch of Nintendo Switch OLED model, we decided that now was the appropriate time to change the European trade price of the Nintendo Switch. The trade prices of the Nintendo Switch Lite and upcoming Nintendo Switch OLED model are not affected. The final price to consumers is determined by retailers. As a guide, we recommend that consumers check with local retailers to find out their prices in My Nintendo Store, which is Nintendo's own retail channel. The price of each Nintendo Switch family console is now, and you can see it here, we have the Switch Lite at $199.99. These are all in pounds. Nintendo Switch $259.99, and then the OLED model at $309.99. They go on further to say we made the price change before the launch of Nintendo Switch OLED model so that the price difference between each model in Nintendo's own retail channel, My Nintendo Store, would be what Nintendo judges to be appropriate for its own store. So I guess the question now is, will there be prices changed in other regions? Hard to say if there will be a price cut here in the US, for example, going from $300 to like some... It's Nintendo. You'd like to say they'll do $250, but they might do some weird pricing where it's like $279.9 or something like that. Or maybe they wait a bit, and as we get closer to the holidays, they do something around Black Friday, or they just do what they usually do, which is throw in a game and just do it as a bundle, and it's still the same price. It still is impressive that Nintendo has not had to have a price cut on the Switch like at all, and they're coming up on the 100 million mark. It just shows how intriguing and how well the Switch is marketed and sold to consumers now. But eventually you get to a point where you start thinking about, okay, could we just sell more units in general if it was $250? And the answer to that is probably yes, but the other question is, will they run into a problem around the system getting supply constrained, as we hear that there is going to be an issue with chip shortages and just overall material shortages to create these systems, potentially going into 2023. So we'll keep an eye on other regions, but for now, at least in Europe, it has been lowered roughly 20 pounds, that according to Nintendo Europe. Next up, let's talk about Deathloop, because reviews did go live yesterday, seemed to surprise a lot of people because, well, take a look here. This over on Metacritic, currently sitting at an 88. And if we look at the critic review split, 68 positive, 5 mixed. In fact, a lot of places gave this game a perfect score, kind of that masterpiece, that must play. Like IGN gave it a 10 out of 10. VG247 giving it 100. EGM giving it 100. We have Digital Chumps at 100. Impulse Gamer at 100. I mean, seriously, the list goes on, and everyone really seems to like the overall, some were calling it gimmick, but I guess the mechanic with the time loop itself. The gunplay is very good, and it's interesting going through and trying to figure everything out before the day restarts. I know we had the whole thing around Returnal and that having the roguelike element to it, and that's sort of what this plays into as well, but you can bring some stuff back with you, and unfortunately, according to a lot of reviewers, the trailers didn't do a great job conveying the overall idea and feel of the game, which is weird because we saw this game so many times at, like, I think it was at every event, like every Sony event, Deathloop was there. It even had its own, like, that was like a 15-minute gameplay session towards the end of a state of play, and apparently they still didn't clearly convey what this game was. But either way, I'm picking it up today to check it out myself, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more on the podcast this weekend, but it also goes back to this technically being a Microsoft game. I mean, Arcane is part of Bethesda, part of ZeniMax, part of Microsoft now, and we just saw Psychonauts 2 come out. and that's kind of up there as like a game of the year consideration for a lot of people. We see Deathloop show up, and now we're starting to realize, wow, okay, Microsoft has been acquiring a lot of high-quality studios now, and Double Fine even went on record saying that Microsoft and what they were able to provide with some of the financial backing, allowing them even to delay the game out to make it better, really helped. And we, of course, have seen Deathloop delayed even while under the Microsoft umbrella after that big acquisition for ZeniMax. So going forward, we still have Forza and Halo coming up, and then next year we know Redfall is coming out of the other Arcane Studios. So yeah, Microsoft making all those acquisitions as soon as these companies or these studios under Microsoft start getting spun up and a lot of these games start releasing left and right. I think it's gonna be a pretty interesting generation going forward. And in our last bit of news, we're gonna close out with a good story here if you're someone who's still looking for a PlayStation 5, especially going into the holidays, because it appears that the prices around the PS5 in the secondhand market are starting to go down. And as that happens, you'll see scalpers and resellers start to lose interest in that product because they won't make as much money as they were, say, when it came out. We can head over here to Forbes, where they looked into this from StockX, saying PS5 prices on the secondary market StockX have tumbled by almost 30% since their peak, according to new data. The company explained to me that after hitting $1,000 on Cyber Week 2020 for the disc version, the console has since dropped to $715 in September. This is also 10% less than the price in June. They go on to talk about the digital edition, which peaked at $1,000 on Cyber Weekend, but now it's down to just under $700. Now, these are still obviously much more expensive than what they're supposed to be at $500 and $400, but it's no longer double what they're supposed to be. Like, that's the biggest thing here, and you start to factor in eBay and PayPal fees, and in some cases, shipping. I mean, is it worth buying a PS5, having bots really crash into a website, hoping to get maybe 2 of them, and then deal with everything around selling and shipping when you're gonna make $100, as opposed to what they were making, which was like $500, $600, even $700 on some of these sales. And there are a lot of other things that you can buy and flip. I know like the whole sneaker secondhand market is big time. So then you start to look at things like this massive PS5 that you're keeping in your living room, hoping someone clicks buy it now on eBay, and it becomes less and less appealing, which is good news for people still looking for a PlayStation 5. Now, it does appear that the Xbox Series X, the price was already kind of falling in the secondhand market, and it's still kind of sitting right where the PS5 is now, but the fact that the PS5 has fallen down a bit in pricing could have to do with maybe stock really getting out there, as Sony is saying, and it's kind of flooding the market a bit, or people just not having as much interest in buying the PS5 for as much as what they were charging on eBay, as opposed to when the system first came out. We were kind of in that honeymoon phase for new hardware. It tends to happen, especially since we're going into the holidays, when some people may just be content with their PlayStation 4 right now, or who knows, we get into the holiday season and everyone's asking for the PS5 and then the prices shoot back up. I'm hoping that we get into next year, these prices continue to drop down to where they're no longer resold at this massive profit and they start appearing again in stores. I will tell you, once they start appearing in physical stores like Walmart's and Target's, just on store shelves, I don't think scalpers are really going to have that much interest in the systems anymore to try to flip, and they'll probably move on. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're taking a little poll I posted up yesterday where I asked, have you played Star Fox Zero before? 81% said no, 19% said yes. And a lot of times we'll have remasters announced for games that I figured most people have played, but then I'll ask these questions. It's like, wow, okay, like half people voting in this poll have not played Skyrim or something like that, didn't buy Skyrim. So it makes sense why you see these games continue to go generation after generation, with even Grand Theft Auto 5 having like 30 or 40% of people say they've never played it before. But I am looking at Star Fox Zero. It was on the Wii U. Like, that's a game that would clearly benefit from a Switch port, and I am curious if that is something we ever see come out of Platinum Games or even Nintendo. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Fern saying, you know, regarding that Nintendo is spoiling Metroid Dread for us argument, it may be so, but if any franchise needs that kind of publicity, it's Metroid. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. Metroid isn't the strongest selling Nintendo franchise out there, and I do genuinely believe that Metroid Dread is going to become the best selling Metroid game ever made. But if Pokemon taught us anything, we need a good controversy. We had like that $60, like, oh, is the 2D game worth 60? And that went away kind of fast when Nintendo started showing some of these trailers and like the kind of the story elements and cutscenes. People were like, wow, okay, that looks pretty high quality. So unfortunately, we don't have that big controversy we have with Pokemon, and we don't even have like a Nintendo 64 tree in Metroid Dread. So I'm just hoping that we can make it past that 3 million mark and we can have Sean tell us all about Balan Wonderworld. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave a comment down below about everything we talked about here. Today was that massive list of games that seem to have just gotten out there, leaked online. A lot of them probably in testing and conceptual phase, but let me know if any of those caught your eye, like Final Fantasy IX Remake. Do you want Square to take a shot at that one after Final Fantasy VII Remake? That's a good question. Also, what about the Deathloop reviews? Are you picking it up today? And then the whole thing around the Switch seeing a price cut. Do you think Nintendo is going to do that in like the US, maybe closer to Black Friday? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.